It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor, and Thomas the Tank Engine was working on his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas was picking up passengers at Dryall Station when Bertie rolled up. "Hello, Thomas. Would you like to have a race?" "Sorry, Bertie," said Thomas. "I can't race with you right now. I have passengers to deliver." "Come on, Thomas. It'll be fun." "Okay, Bertie," said Thomas. "First one to Knapford wins." "Okay," said Bertie. Just then the guard's whistle blew. "On your mark," said Thomas. "Get set. Go!" Soon Thomas was racing down the track, having a wonderful time. "Bertie will never catch me." But then there was trouble. Molly was puffing down the track with a heavy goods train. "Look out, Molly!" cried Thomas. Luckily, a quick-thinking signalman changed the points. Just in time. "Thomas!" Later, Thomas pulled into Knapford Station. A few seconds later, Bertie bustled in. "I have to say, Thomas, you are pretty fast. We should have another race sometime." "Of course we should," replied Thomas. Just then, Thomas saw Sir Top Hat walking towards them. "We'll see you later, Thomas," said Bertie. "I have passengers to deliver." And he roared away. "Oh dear," thought Thomas. "What'll he say?" "Thomas," said Sir Top Hat, "I have a special job for you. There are passengers here who are going to an exhibition on Misty Island. You must collect them and take them there right now." "But what about my branch line, sir?" said Thomas, nervously. "Don't worry, Thomas. Percy will take care of your branch line while you're gone." "Thank you, sir," said Thomas. Just then the guard's whistle blew, and Thomas puffed off to the Misty Island tunnel. Thomas never liked going through the Misty Island tunnel, but it was always worth it when he reached the other side. When Thomas came out of the tunnel, he was surprised by what he saw. Instead of a wild, crazy, misty railway, there was a huge exhibit full of many things. Thomas was very excited. As Thomas approached his stop, he could see an engine he had never seen before. "Hello," said Thomas. "Who are—" But then Thomas looked up and saw the biggest engines he had ever seen. "Hello," said the big green engine. "My name is Jerry." "And I'm Marvin," said the bigger engine. "And I'm Alan, and we welcome you to the railway exhibition." "But whatever happened to Misty Island?" asked Thomas. The engine stared. Well, they thought it was a bad idea to build a railway for some engines just because they were bad. So they destroyed the railway, they sent the logging locos to America, and then we came and built the O-Gauge Railway. Thomas had many more questions, but he decided not to ask them right now. "I see you brought the railway inspectors," said Alan. "We don't need you right now, so why don't you go and explore the railway exhibition?" "Okay," said Thomas, and he puffed away to explore. Thomas was going to talk to Flora and Arthur when he heard a voice. "Hello," it said. "Who's there?" asked Thomas. "I am," said the voice. It was the smallest engine Thomas had ever seen, and he was surprised. "He's smaller than Mike, Rex, and Bert," Thomas thought to himself. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I thought this was an island for bigger engines." "It might be, but this is a railway exhibition, and that doesn't mean they can't have the smallest engine in the world be there." Thomas was impressed. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get ready for my inspection." And so the little engine rolled away. So Thomas went to talk to Arthur and Flora. While Thomas talked to Arthur and Flora, Jerry gave rides to the inspectors, and so did Louis. But soon it was time to go. Thomas said goodbye to all of his new friends and went back to Knapford. It was evening by the time Thomas got back to Knapford, and he wondered to himself, when would the exhibition open? But his question was answered sooner than he thought it would be. A few days later, Sir Topham Hatt came to see Thomas one morning at Knapford. "Thomas, I have some great news," he said. "The railway inspectors thought that the exhibition was great, and that the exhibition will be open to the public next week." Thomas couldn't wait for the opening day of the exhibition, but that's another story. It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor, and Thomas was pulling into Knapford Station, delivering passengers on his branch line, when Sir Topham Hatt walked up to him with some very exciting news. "Today, the railway exhibition is opening to the public." Thomas was excited. "Thomas, I need you to take these coaches to the exhibition." "What for?" asked Thomas. "It's a surprise," said Sir Topham Hatt. "But who will run my branch line?" asked Thomas. "Percy will run your branch line today," said Sir Topham Hatt. And with that, he walked into his office. Percy buffered up to Annie and Clarabelle, while Thomas buffered up to the other coaches. "Don't worry, Thomas. I'll take care of Annie and Clarabelle," said Percy, and he set off. But Thomas hadn't been listening to Percy. He was too busy wondering what the surprise was. Soon Thomas arrived at the railway exhibition. Thomas could see Gordon in the goods siding. "What's Gordon doing over there?" wondered Thomas. But then Thomas rounded a bend and saw none other than the Flying Scotsman. "Well, bless my buffers," said Thomas. "What are you doing here, Flying Scotsman?" "I'm here to take the special train, Thomas," said Flying Scotsman. "I see," said Thomas, and with that he pulled the coaches into the platform. But then there was trouble. "The coaches overrun the siding," cried the Flying Scotsman. "How am I supposed to get out?" Just then Gordon came along to save the day. "Thanks, brother," said Flying Scotsman. "Oh, don't worry about it," said Gordon, and he pulled the coaches away. Thomas went to get into the same siding as Flora. Then Gordon shunted the coaches back into position. Flying Scotsman went a couple up to the train. And with the toot of his whistle, he was off. Flying Scotsman went back and forth all day taking passengers. But soon it was time for Flying Scotsman to go home. All the passengers said they had had a wonderful day before Flying Scotsman left. And as Thomas went to collect the coaches, he also had to agree that it had been a wonderful day at the railway exhibition. It was a busy day on the island of Sodor, and Thomas was going to Brendam Docks to help Percy with a special job. He was thinking about something that had happened in the past. "All I want is a bit of redefining, the slinky slinkers with your carpet smooth and shining. to get the speed I really need. Streamlining. Later, Thomas arrived at Brendam Docks. Percy was already there. "Where's the special delivery?" asked Thomas. "The ship still hasn't arrived," replied Percy. "Do you remember what happened last time we had to wait on a ship?" asked Thomas. "No," answered Percy. "What?" "Well, I'll tell you," replied Thomas. "We decided to play hide and seek, but I couldn't find you, so I would tell you were needed for something, and then you would come out, and then I would yell, 'Found you!' But when you really were needed and I called out for you, you stayed quiet and hidden because you didn't believe me." "Oh yeah," said Percy. "I remember that now. Do you know what else I remember, Thomas?" "What?" asked Thomas. "I remember the day when the trucks wouldn't stop pushing me, so I was a runaway, and then I had an accident with the brake van. Peep, peep, look out!" Thomas laughed. He remembered that day too. "Do you remember the day when Gordon dragged me along with the express?" asked Thomas. "And I backed up at that signal that one time? And that one time where I saved James and got my own branch line? And that one time where I got frozen and scared James? And that one time where I met Terrence? And that one time where I pulled the express?" "Percy, that was me," said Thomas. "Oh, it was?" asked Percy. "Yes." "Oh." "The ship is here," said Cranky. Soon Cranky was hard at work loading the engines. And when he was done, Thomas and Percy left. And they both had to agree that they had had some crazy days in their lives. One day, Arthur was taking Sir Topham Hatt on a tour of his branch line. Sir Topham Hatt was enjoying the tour very much. But at one point, they passed by the pier. "Excuse me, Arthur," asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Can you tell me what that was?" "What was what, sir?" That pier, with the tracks on it." "Oh, you're talking about the pier, aren't you?" "Yes, why is it there, and what was it used for?" "Well, it was used for loading cargo from boats to trains, and vice versa. It hasn't been used for a long time." Thinking about the pier gave Sir Topham Hatt an idea. A few weeks later, the siding at the railway exhibition was blocked off. The other engines were curious and started to wonder why. But a few days after the siding was blocked off, Thomas was asked to take some freight cars to Brendam Docks. Salty was at the docks waiting for Thomas. "Right on time, me hearty, ha ha ha." "Indeed," said another voice. Thomas and Salty looked to see Sir Topham Hatt standing in front of them. Sir Topham Hatt walked closer to Thomas. "Thomas, I need you to deliver some supplies to the siding at the railway exhibition." "But, sir, isn't it blocked off?" "Oh, don't worry. Some people are there to let you in." "Okay, sir," said Thomas. So Thomas got uncoupled and went to collect the supplies. Soon Thomas had collected the supplies and puffed away to the railway exhibition. When he arrived, 2 men were standing on the gate. "Password," one of them said. "Password? Oh no, Sir Topham Hatt never said anything about a password. What am I gonna—" Suddenly, the 2 men started laughing. "We were only pulling your wheels. We've been expecting you. We'll have this gate open in no time." And the man was as good as his word. In a matter of seconds, the gate was open, and Thomas puffed along the siding. "I wonder what's down here that needs supplies," wondered Thomas. But Thomas soon found out. Sir Topham Hatt had asked that there be a pier built near the railway exhibition. Jerome was helping out with the construction of the pier. Thomas also noticed that his good friend Ryan was helping out. "Hello, Ryan," he said. "How's it going?"
"Oh, hello, Thomas. Sir Topham Hatt has asked me to help out with building the pier, and the workmen are saying that we might get done by tonight."
"Wow," replied Thomas. "How exciting!" Shortly after Thomas had delivered the supplies, the workmen allowed Thomas to stay and watch. And that evening, the last piece of track was put into place. The workmen cheered, and the engines whistled.
"It will be splendid when we have our grand opening."
A couple days later, it was the pier's opening day. Sir Topham Hatt had just finished giving a speech. And so, without further ado, I declare this pier open. Everyone cheered as Ryan took the first train of passengers onto the pier. And everyone, including Thomas, had to agree that it was a splendid grand opening indeed. There once was an engine whose brakes had failed. It went to the top of a hill and crashed at a bend. No one had been hurt. The engine's freight cars were empty, and the engine was easily re-railed. Another engine came and took the engine and some of its freight cars away, although the rest of the cars were left at the bottom of the hill. Many years later, an engine saw the derailed cars and decided to tell Sir Topham Hatt. A couple days later, a diesel brought in a crane called Jerome to sort out the mess. The diesel left Jerome as it already had too many jobs. And so Jerome set to work. Soon the cars had been re-railed, and Jerome waited for another engine to come and take him home. Suddenly, an engine called Spencer raced along the track. He saw Jerome and applied his brakes. Too late, Spencer biffed Jerome and sent him rolling backwards down the hill. There was now a runaway crane loose on Sodor. It almost crashed into the express, and it rolled into the long, dark tunnel. When he came out the other side, he rolled through the railway exhibition and was now making his way to the pier. Ryan was there with a train of passengers when suddenly, Jerome was now hanging over the edge of the pier, going to fall off at any moment. Luckily, Ryan was there to help him, and he pulled Jerome to safety. "Thank you," said Jerome. "If it wasn't for you, I would have fallen in the water." "It's the least I could do," said Ryan. "Besides, I couldn't let a breakdown crane fall in the ocean." And the two just laughed. The end.
"Well," said Percy, "that was a good story." "Well, at least it's better than the bus that attacked the express," said Toby. "Be quiet, Toby."
"I could tell you a better story about the Great Western Railway." And the three engines groaned as Duck told them about the Great Western Railway. It was a very windy day on the island of Sodor. Hero was getting ready to take a goods train when Salty rolled up. "I'd take care if I were you today, matey. High winds be comin'." "Oh my," thought Hero. Just then the guard's whistle blew, and Hero puffed away. Hero was making great time as he puffed along the line. Then there was trouble. As Hero puffed along, he felt the wind blowing hard. But as Hero rounded a bend, the wind blew him right off the track. Hero's crew had jumped clear before the crash, and he was more shocked than damaged. But Hero wouldn't be the only one to have problems like this. A few minutes later, Bulgy was at a station. He was selling vegetables. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind caused Bulgy to tip over. Like Hero, Bulgy was more shocked than damaged. His driver wasn't with them when he tipped over, and no one was around him either. But only a couple minutes after that accident, Jeremy was scheduled to take off from the Sodor airport. "I'd take care if I were you, Jeremy," warned Harold. "The wind's strong today." "Ha," said Jeremy. "A little wind won't stop me." Just then, Jeremy was ready to take off, but before he could leave the ground and go into the air, a strong gust of wind blew him right off the runway. Jeremy's passengers and pilot weren't hurt, but Jeremy's landing gear was damaged and he would have to go in for repairs. Meanwhile, Percy had just finished filling up at a water tower when suddenly a strong gust of wind blew a tree over and it blocked the tracks. "That's not good," said Percy. But then Percy was horrified when he heard a familiar whistle. It was Gordon, and he was coming down the line with the express. "Oh no," cried Percy. "I gotta stop Gordon." So Percy raced down the tracks to try and stop Gordon. He stopped at a junction that was close to the express line. Just then, Percy saw Gordon approaching with the express. Percy whistled as loud as he could. "Stop, Gordon, stop." Luckily for Percy, Gordon had heard him. Gordon applied his brakes and managed to stop right in front of the tree. "What on Sodor is this?" asked Gordon. "Percy, you saved my express. Thank you." Percy felt proud. He had saved the day. The next day, the messes that the wind had caused were cleaned up, and all the engines were running on schedule. But I just hope Sodor doesn't see another windy day like this for a while. Don't you? It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor, and Thomas was working on his branch line when suddenly... Thomas was so startled that he applied his brakes. Annie and Clarabelle bumped and biffed into each other. "Oh dear, Thomas, what are you doing?" "Did any of you see that?" "See what?" "I saw an airplane. It was flying so low, it could have hit me." "Well, I didn't see anything, did you, Clarabelle?" "No, Annie, I didn't see anything." Huh, it must have just been my imagination. So, Thomas continued down his branch line. But this wouldn't be the only time an incident like this would happen today. Duck was puffing down the line with a train of cars when suddenly... Oh dear! Duck applied his brakes. Duck shut his eyes as the airplane pulled up and barely missed him. "Oh, I say, what was that?" Duck puffed further up the line when he saw something that made him shudder. "What happened here?" asked Duck. "A silly little airplane caught me off guard and made me crash into Hero," replied James. "Oh dear," said Duck. "That sounds serious. I'll go get help." And so Duck went to get help. But as Duck was going to get help, on another part of the island, Gordon was getting ready to leave with the express. He was just pulling out of the station when the airplane flew right over him. "Whoa, Gordon," called his driver and stopped the train. "I say," said Gordon, "one day that little airplane's going to get into a heap of trouble." But that day came sooner than anticipated. A couple of days later, the airplane was still causing lots of trouble for the engines. But then the airplane saw a train puffing down the track. It was Toby, and he was pulling his coach, Henrietta, and a short train of freight cars. This ought to be good, thought the airplane, but little did it know that this would be the moment that things went terribly wrong. The airplane was just catching up to Toby, but this was when Toby saw Terrence the tractor on the line ahead. Toby put on his brakes hard, and that's when it happened. Pieces of metal lay everywhere. Miraculously, Terrence and Toby weren't affected by the crash, and no people were hurt. Henrietta was only minorly affected by the crash and could easily be repaired. The freight cars, however, had been majorly affected and would take a long time to repair. But the one who got the most damage was the plane. Later, a crane came to sort out the mess, while Sir Topham Hatt had a stern word with the plane. "You should know that it's dangerous to do tricks like this on a busy railway." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I just thought that if I did tricks like this, it would make me look cool, sir." "Well, I hope you have learned that if something looks cool, it can also be dangerous. Anyways, what's your name?" "My name is Tiger Moth, sir." "Well, Tiger Moth, I have arranged for you to be fixed at the Sodor Airport. Now, I don't want you going around doing dangerous tricks anymore. Understand?" "Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I promise I won't do it again, sir." "That's good," said Sir Topham Hatt, and he walked away. After that, Toby puffed away to the Sodor Airport. A few weeks later, Tiger Moth had been fixed and was ready to fly again. And whenever he saw railway tracks, he made sure to fly well above them to avoid having another accident. And Tiger Moth really did learn his lesson on flying close to railway tracks. Every engine on the island of Sodor loves to be busy, and they also like to be really useful. But if you ever went to the high hills of Sodor, you would find a smaller team of really useful engines. This team of engines are no other than the narrow gauge engines. Out of this team of engines are Rusty, Rheneas, Duke, Fearless Freddy, and Skarloey. There are other engines like Sir Handel and Peter Sam, but they had gone to help out on the Talyllyn Railway. And there are other engines like Luke and Duncan, who had gone to help on the mainland. The 4 engines had temporarily been sent away because business on this railway had slowed down, and business on the other railways had boomed, so they needed more help. And since this railway wasn't too busy at the moment, they were sent to help out. While it's not very busy, there are still a lot of jobs to do, but nothing these 5 engines can't handle. One morning, Mr. Percival came to see his engines. As you all know, business isn't at its fastest these days, and since we're not very busy, I want to take the time to experiment with some new wagons we have just received. The engines were puzzled, but then Mr. Percival started to walk towards Rheneas. "Rheneas, I want you to go and collect the new cars from the transfer yards. You'll know what they look like when you see them." "Yes, sir," said Rheneas. But Rheneas was puzzled and wondered what kind of new wagons they would be. But Mr. Percival was right. There in the transfer yard stood 3 wagons Rheneas had never seen before. They were 3 brand new white tankers. Right then, said Rheneas, you're coming with me. And Rheneas went to get turned around. Soon Rheneas's train had been arranged and he was ready to leave. But just then, Duke puffed up. He was going to collect a passenger train. I'd take care if I were you, said Duke. New wagons sometimes mean trouble. Don't worry, Duke, said Rheneas. I'll be fine. If you say so, said Duke, and he got out of Rheneas's way. Just then, Rheneas's guard's whistle blew, and Rheneas left the transfer yards, pulling the 3 experimental tankers. Rheneas puffed along the track. He was making great time. But the tanker cars were growing bored, and they wanted to cause trouble. Soon, Rheneas came to a hill. The tankers' chance had come. Hold back, they said. Even though there were only 3 tankers, they were very heavy, and Rheneas was finding them hard to handle. The tankers started to laugh. But luckily, Rheneas made it to the top of the hill. But for every upside, there's a downside. Seconds later, Rheneas reached the other side of the hill. He gently applied his brakes, but it was no good. On, yelled the tankers. And they started to push Rheneas down the hill. Rheneas applied his brakes full force, but it was no good. Faster, giggled the tankers. But just ahead, Rusty was on the line with the maintenance train. Look out, Rusty, cried Rheneas. But Rheneas was in for it now. He crashed into the buffers on the line ahead. The tankers started to giggle. But the track Rheneas had crashed on was close to the edge of a cliff, and Rheneas was hanging dangerously over the side. At least if I go down, these tankers are coming with me, said Rheneas. Oh, no you don't, said Rusty, and he quickly went off to get help. Later, Rheneas was saved. Mr. Percival came to the scene of the crash. I'm so glad you're okay, said Mr. Percival. Cheer up, the crash wasn't your fault. It was those silly experimental tankers that caused the accident. I don't think you'll be seeing those again. But Mr. Percival was wrong. The tankers became popular with businesses, and you can see them on at least one train every day. But besides Rheneas's accident, the tankers have never caused trouble on the Skarloey Railway. But that's another story.